Okay, so here we are, episode, the next one. I've now finished all the way up to the tier 1. So I'm going to run through this, which is what that is, and I'll explain sort of what's going on along the way. So the first thing about the base mod is that it's very iron heavy, but we have more metals available. So I did a bit of a survival playthrough, just to see what was going on. And I had a lot of copper and tin. I thought, well, we already have bronze here, but I actually removed the electronic blast furnace. So the idea is that the only machine available is the melter. So I have added a crafting recipe that does this. Obviously, it's about half as efficient as it would be in an alloy furnace. This is to encourage you to do this with a blast furnace at the next tier. That gives you bronze. So then you make this bronze casing is the idea. This is very similar in crafting to the mechanism casing, except it's bronze and iron instead of steel and osmium, I think. This is what you use to craft the melter. You need a casing for this, so you do have to do this. It does come up in a bit as well. And I changed this one to put a furnace in the middle because it just made sense. So the next step is you need plates. You have to cast every plate object, because normally you'd make this into compressor, but that isn't available at this tier. But if you look at the casting recipe, these are only metals, so you have to have a plate that you can cast, and that's what the copper is. You then make a cast. I changed this texture to fit the plates, so there's a resource pack for that. And then the next step is steel. So I was debating how to do this, but again, we've already had the precedent of crafting alloys in a crafting table. So what we've got here is this kind of blister steel, and this is a real kind of steel in an early, less efficient steel making process. So obviously this makes 3, but if you look at how much this melts into, it's 6 nuggets. So actually this 3 becomes 2 steel, which you then cast as plates. I've also added this bronze plate. This texture is the worst thing that I've made so far. That's okay. This one is not, but I have no artistic ability at all. Most of the good textures here are modifications of the other textures that people have made. So then this next part is the tier 1 rocket fins. Now I added the bronze because it's got this orange stuff on the top. It's the same colour as this, and this in the crafting recipe is copper. But I thought this otherwise just have more use for the bronze at least. So the next step is this contraption. Now, if you look in the pack description on Curseforge, it says it's inspired by Greg New Horizons, and this is where this becomes really obvious, because you make a circuit and then you put it here. So copper for like the contact traces. This is venom, which is eyes. This is for like acid etching, and then tin as in soldering. And then this gives you this tier 1 circuit. Now this process will be, so one of the things about Greg New Horizons is that when you level up to a tier, the crafting recipes for the tier below become a lot easier. So I haven't quite decided how I'm going to do that, but presumably it would be you put these objects in a blast furnace, and it just does it in one step. So that's, and then to lock the tier in, this is the tier 1. This is pretty much the same other than the plate as the regular. This is where it gets a little bit. There's a lot of steps involved. So this mod pack so far has no like metal motor. And again, the Greg Tech is coming in a little bit. So we've got copper coils, and you use the coils to make a motor. And then you take this sort of copper nozzle. I was playing around with textures and I made this thing by accident, and so now I have to use it. And then you cast it by putting 4 ingots of steel in on it. That gives you the steel nozzle, and then you use that with the motors and the fans and the engine frames. These are modified from the regular mod, and that gives you the steel engine. I decided not to change these 2 tanks yet, because I couldn't really figure out whether it didn't just feel like making things more difficult for the sake of making them more difficult. Obviously the tanks have that little orange part on the top, so I thought maybe put a bronze plate there, but whatever. So then this is how you craft the tier 1 rocket. I'm probably going to change these because this is most of the steel sink, so I might change it with when you get to tier 2 you could use something that's a lot cheaper than 9 steel for this, but that's sort of the idea. So we're missing two things really. So obviously we now have the rocket. The launch pad recipe is unchanged. I probably change that. I think I'll use Tinker's large plates just because it makes sense. It's the fuel. So how do we make the fuel? Well, this is one of the only other crafting options that we have here. And I was looking for something that was like a fermenter, and yeah. So this is this takes any crop type of recipe, and it takes 100 seconds to, it takes a while, and you need this many to make this much biomass, and then each one melts into 10. Let me see, 1/10 of a bucket, so you need 3, and obviously if you want to come back you want another 3. So I originally removed the blast furnace because my survival world just had like 3 machines in a corner of a wooden house, and it felt a little bit silly really. But then I got to the problem with the spacesuit, because, well, that's quite an advanced piece of technology, but most specifically the putting oxygen in the suit. I couldn't figure out how to do it in a way that made sense. Like, the only other option really was like using a melter and pouring liquid oxygen on the suit. But then how are you going to get liquid oxygen like that? It doesn't make sense. So I caved and modified the recipes for these 2. So this uses the nozzle from earlier. The idea is that you're like blowing gas at a fan, and then there's a coil, and and then the compressor, the oxygen loader. I put a motor in there because it sort of makes sense. I think I put that in there as well. There's a few things that are missing though. There isn't really any useful diamonds in here. I think something like that should be. There's also, there's gold that's used for the casts, but you only need like 1 or 2. So there's a couple of things that could be modified later on. But the other thing is, so in the regular mod you have essentially these 2. You've got fuel and the cryo fuel, which are these 4. So you have the fuel, which I've talked about the change here, and then the cryo fuel, which is what the ice shards are used for really. But the problem is that then after that you just use these for the rest of the playthrough, and that doesn't really make sense. So I kind of headcanoned the types of fuel that these 4 tiers would use. So this is Carolox, and if you look at the one picture online that exists of RP1 rocket fuel, it's this colour. So this is very obviously the inspiration for that level of fuel, which is why it's a sort of carbon biomass type thing. I think bioethanol, which there is a liquid in the pack, but it's bright green and it looks bad. Cryofuel is obviously, it being like lunar ice, is hydrolox, and that sort of makes sense for, you could get to the moon with a Keralox rocket, you could get to Mars with a hydrolox rocket, but then we're talking about going quite a distance, Venus and Mercury. So I added nuclear fuel, and this is a liquid that I have added myself, but I have added it to be the actual. So if I was to launch that, it would actually get used up. And I kind of added this because I was going to use the fissile fuel, and it will still use this chemical, but this is a chemical rather than a liquid, a different type. And I probably can't make the rockets use a different type of object rather than just a recipe to turn the fissile fuel into that. So that's the idea. And then this one is the DT fuel from Mechanism, which is used for the fusion reactor, and that's already a liquid. So the idea that this is like maybe nuclear pulse propulsion or nuclear salt water, probably more like, and then this would be fusion drive, something along the lines of the Daedalus. It's a shame this is purple, but I kind of like that colour, so it's going to stay like that. I've added, it turns out these are just like liquid tags, and you can change them, so that's what I've done. I had some trouble with the tags on this one, but maybe you could use that one for that one more efficiently, like is supposed to in the original mod, but yeah. And of course the rover is here, because I talked about travel in the first part, so I basically want to see how viable is this, and is there some chance of like a rocket sled or something before you get to the jet suit at the higher tier. And so the last thing really is these things. So I have this idea based on a building that's in the book Dying of the Light, which I have made a video on. Essentially, this is going to be, this isn't like set up, these don't link yet. The idea is that it's going to be like a big tower, but these rooms, these quarters, they generate, each one of these is one set of structures. And so sometimes it's one big thing, it's like 2 and then 1, or then 2 and then 1. And this is based on the video about building mega structures in Minecraft, because like this thing about it being 3 and it being variated, and then you could do, I think structures are limited to 7 or 8 recursions, so you could do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the 7th room. I don't know if I want to do them all randomly, or put some more structure in there, so you have 1 floor, 2 floor, 3 floor. Could do anything really. This is ended up being sort of a subscale. This is supposed to be a scale, and it's kind of too small. But this is sort of the general idea. I haven't quite decided where I want to put that yet. So obviously on Venus there are the piglin towers, or the pigro towers. So there's precedent for tower structures in the mod already. But this specifically will also be able to add resources that the player won't be able to get on the moon otherwise. Yeah, so that's the idea. So also I wanted to add everything in this mod is hand coded. It kind of sucks that these days you have to be explicit about that. It is 800 lines, of handwritten code. It's written in Notepad++. I didn't use any generators. I copied that stuff off the internet and I modified it as as you're supposed to. So yeah, that's and also this has now been uploaded to Curseforge. It's the beta 0.1.0. It's now completable up to the first tier. There is also a quest book that is, mostly there. I haven't quite figured out how I want to link these in yet. This is a giant mess, but this does follow. The idea is that if you don't know what's going on, this should show you the way through. So that's that, I guess.